what you were saying earlier about that you're always interested in stories, right? Where humans are storytellers. So there's Richard Rorty talks about it, that all we have are stories, and we reorient these stories. We tell new narratives. We have vocabularies, and then we renew our vocabularies to understand the world that we're currently in. And also Yuval Noah Harari picks it up in his Homo Deus, for example, and says we're storytellers, and the stories we live in today, there are something like capitalism, right, or like Western values, something like democracy, the success story of the West, also, right, of the Enlightenment, of the law system, of equality, of liberty, and all these values that we hold so dearly. And I guess the question is now, from what we see, how will this overall have an impact on these things? So, for example, there was this historian, Frank Snowden, not Edward Snowden, Frank Snowden, who in Epidemics and Society, he writes, for example, that the Black Death in the 14th century, which was so horribly terrible and horribly deathly to so many people, so many millions died back then, that it undermined the faith in the Catholic Church back then. And then in the 1500s, we had these Protestant movements coming. So in what sense, and I know that it's a very philosophical question, but in what sense can we see something of these stories being undermined, perhaps? Do we see an undermining of the success of Western capitalism? And if yes, are we moving towards China, perhaps, if they're going to handle the crisis more successfully?
These are really hard to answer questions, because it's in Snowden's book, a lot of these cataclysmic changes or pandemics also were the tipping point of change that were occurring or already, right? It was the tipping point. It was the straw on the camel's back, and you like the fall of the Roman Empire, or we know the Athens Spartan War, and the outcome victor, but you forget that there was a plague that happened in the middle of it, and like, how did that weigh on the winner or the loser? And was it the catalyst for the change? Was it the zeitgeist that was going on? Like, did it conjure this up? Right? It's just like a lot of the institutions and the way that a lot of things were wobbly, to put it in Nietzsche's terms. Like, there's a lot of wobbly things that were already going on, right? We've had movement after movement. You had, especially the United States in the last, 12 years, specifically from the last financial crisis. You had President Obama. You had the Tea Party movement, right? That was a counter to that. You had President Trump, who's another movement. You've had the Me Too movement. You've had the Black Lives Matter. You've had lots of there's been lots of, a lot of it's populist driven, right? That's like tugging back and forth against a lot of the systems and institutions that we've had in place since World War II. Right? I mean, President Trump ran on a lot of campaign. Like, part of his campaign was like, "Hey, let's break up some of these institutions that have been in place, like NATO since World War II, that had a lot of my friends in Europe, scared to death, because it's like, wait, what? Everything's worked since World War II. You turn on the lights, the light comes on. You flush the toilet, right? It works, right? The lights work, and so over the past, since my lifetime, and most everyone that's been alive right now, things more or less has worked seamlessly with a few blips in there, right? We had the Gulf War, right, that lasted a day, right? I'm being facetious here, but I mean, even our worst things have moved on, I wouldn't say quickly, but they have almost been forgotten in our collective psyche, because something, unlike a world war, right, or a civil war, or these types of things. And the question is, is a pandemic and these these movements that are happening worldwide, even before the virus, there was like 20 cities around the world that had movements going on, people in the streets, Hong Kong, Tehran, right? I mean, you're like, what's going on? There's an unrest. There's there's a bubbling up that's occurring, right? And then you have a pandemic that comes about it. And we don't know where we're at in this, right? The best case scenario is it's almost over and we'll be, for some, it will be right back to normal. There's others that are like, I'm never going back to normal, no matter what that is. I now have a new way of being. I mean, the jury is still out on which way are we going to go through all of this, right? And if you don't know, do you have the tools psychologically, because that's where the real battles are always, right? That's where the real wild places are, is between our own head and our own time and space. We have to navigate this world. I mean, do you have what it takes to find some solid ground for yourself as you move through these plate tectonic shifts, right? I think we're all kind of looking for that, right? And everyone's giving a different answer. Alcoholic sales were up at the very beginning, right? So was Peloton membership, right? Which is a home bicycling app, right? Where you can get healthy. Like my wife is doing jazz, you know, she's getting healthier, right? I mean, some people are drinking more, right? I mean, everyone's trying to cope or master this situation in different ways. So I too am in that boat. We are all, can't escape the times. So it's certainly philosophically interesting, but it has to be lived pragmatically, and we're all searching for our own answers.
Well, one thing that we're also seeing, I guess, that the pandemic has been responded to in the world in different ways, right? So there's in China it was this really intense lockdown, which until now it seems successful so far, right? And then in Europe they took like this middle route, which was in the beginning was difficult. Now it seems okay. And then so UK and US, they were the ones who kind of take it a bit like easy going, not too strict measures. So it's
laissez-faire.
It's a very liberal.
Right. That's right.
It's a tradition of liberty, right? Liberty is very important to especially these countries, to the UK and to the US. So and my question would be like, moving forward, you mentioned earlier how social distancing is going to have an impact on the economy. So is this something that is going to influence these global systems, like the global economic powers? Are we going to see a shift maybe, right, to like more state-controlled governments and less liberty overall?
I'm not sure. So first, let's just say that the data out of China, I hold skeptical. I mean, we don't know. I mean, yes, China, through its authoritarian regime, and they're very smart people, right, are able to do things that not just a democracy like the United States, but a democracy on every level. I mean, the United States is a democracy inside a democracy inside a democracy, right? You've got local governments, you got city governments, you got city councils, you got mayors, you got counties, right? You've got governors, right? You have Congress people, you have the president, right? I mean, in America, you've got a lot of folks, right? There's a lot of democracy going on, right? And so compare that, and so in China, right? They can do one thing and lock it down, and so on a calamity like a virus, right? That hits a country like the United States square between the eyes of its freedoms, right? And its democracy and its local rule and its federalism, and it showed up in an election year, which makes it tough for politicians whose job is to be popular to win a vote. Well, being popular isn't always, sometimes it's the right thing, and sometimes it may not be the right thing, especially when it comes to something like a pandemic that is porous. It doesn't care about our local governments, our county governments, our state government, and our federal government, right? And so a city can enact a social distance ordinance that the county may not follow, that a neighboring county may not follow, that the state may not follow, that the federal government may not follow, right? And so a virus doesn't care anything about that, and so it can seep through those holes. when you get something like a war, America can be very effective, right? I mean, we can all come together. You have the federal government that leads it, and it goes and it interacts something that is traumatic like that. But something that attacks within inside, and you're playing off politics against each other when you're trying to win votes, right? It makes it tough to wrestle or get to the answer. Unlike like in Italy, right? In Italy, when the virus was going on, right, democracy, but they had a unified voice, right? Or Germany, right? The virus is dangerous. Do this, right? And there's a longer tradition in some of the European countries of just saying, okay, I believe the government. They told us to do this. We're going to do this. I mean, America was founded on the premise, right, of a bunch of rebels, right, of scallywags or revolutionaries that, you know, live free or die, question everything, right? And so when you have competing stories, and even our experts can't agree, right? It's hard to wrestle down something like that. Now, does that cause into question the best way to govern? I don't know. I mean, it does call into question during an election year. Can democracies, right, based on a federalist system that is governing one of the most libertine, I mean, like free-loving people that there is, it does call into question, right? And so that's why this virus is punching America right in the nose. It doesn't, you know, every system is going to have its Achilles heel, and maybe a pandemic is an Achilles heel to a democracy. Does that mean democracies are bad, or the way that we're handling it is bad? Everyone has an opinion about that, right? I mean, I don't know. It's too early to tell. But yes, a one rule system of a bunch of technocrat, bureaucratic, scientific-minded, high IQ folks like China, can they wrestle down and lock people and weld them in their homes and that stamp out a virus? Yeah, that's probably an effective way to do it. A lot of people would question, do they want to live that way? And it'd be hard to do in a place like America. So who knows which way? The other thing about America, right? I mean, our socials, Europe has a much, their safety net, so to speak, as people call that, right? The benefits to catch those that fall through the crack, right, are probably more tightly woven. And so, you know, America right now has sent out stimulus checks, even though that there's been unemployment. For a lot of folks that have been unemployed, the federal government has, a lot of them had their pay has been met, and for up to about $60,000 has been exceeded. That is running out right now. The question is, what will the government do if the virus is still rolling on and businesses aren't able to rehire people back? Are we in a pandemic going to allow folks to be unemployed and be evicted from their homes? You know, the issue with that is, while the stock market is rising, right? I mean, what type of public unrest will that bring to bear? I mean, I think you're seeing a lot of the protests. It's of the groups that want more justice, laid on top of a pandemic where there is not a full unemployment, and there's just overall dissatisfaction. You know, what will happen? You know, the next couple of months are really crucial for our, just our overall, social being. That how are we going to interact with each other? So the politicians have a lot on their plate right now.